Making a competitive Pokemon team in the games can be very challenging. So challenging, in fact, that people often just hack in their Pokemon using external tools. And when I've covered what it is like to do this before, I always avoid doing any glitches or exploits. My goal has always been to see what Game Freak thinks is fine, despite knowing their games are getting tournament play. But what is the best we could do if we allowed glitches? How fast can I get a particular generation to go if I allow anything bar hacking? I think I can get it done in under 24 hours. That's what I'm going to test today in Generation 4. I've done this generation already, but without any glitches for Ray Rizzo's 2010 VGC team. I'll be doing it again, but for this random Showdown OU team that I picked out. I want to try and get the team as quickly as I can, but I don't want to start from a fresh save. So I'll be continuing from all the initial prep work I did using Ray Rizzo's team. So what are the rules here? Well, all glitches are allowed and all games that I have are allowed. I can use anything from any one of the Gen 3 or Gen 4 games, and RNG manipulation is of course allowed. I'm not allowed to hack like via action replay, and all the Pokemon I get in the end have to be legal. So no like getting egg moves on a Pokemon that's not in a Pokeball, for example. Lastly, I'm going to have a live split timer up in the upper left-hand corner all video. This is going to be the time I actively spent on the challenge, and then I will combine that with the prep work time that it took me to do the original Ray Rizzo team. With that, let's get underway with the prep. Our total prep work for Ray Rizzo's 2010 VGC team was 30 hours and 49 minutes. Let's see what I can keep, change, or remove from back then. First of all, we can discount the entirety of the playthroughs of Emerald and Platinum. Back then, I needed multiple version-exclusive legendary Pokemon, and if you had been a fan for a while and owned all of the games, you probably would have caught these Pokemon already. So I had to replay the games to get these Pokemon. This is the same for one-time consumables, like PP Maxes or TMs like Earthquake. But with glitches, I can respawn Pokemon and clone items infinitely, so it doesn't really matter here. We can remove all of the time that these playthroughs took. I do still need the Chadots though, so that's 16 minutes. We can also remove the Pokerus RNG that I did, because you can get Pokerus very quickly within Generation 3 by doing Glitzer Popping. In Pokemon Emerald, the Pomeg Berry lets you reduce a Pokemon's HP EVs by 10 every time you use it on them. There's a slight oversight though. It also directly and immediately lowers your Pokemon's HP. You can use this to feint your entire party without whiting out and going to a Poke Center. Then, when you get into a battle, you'll send out a question mark circle thing. The community calls these Deca Marks. This freaks out the game and lets you move your cursor in the party menu out of bounds. And when you scroll with it, you can scroll into your Pokemon boxes, and that will corrupt your Pokemon who never expected to have anything hover over them like that. This is called Glitzer Popping. Unless you're very clever and precise, when these Pokemon corrupt, they will turn into bad eggs. But these bad eggs will also have Pokerus, so I can use this trick to get Pokerus. It sounds like a lot, but in reality, this takes like 5 minutes to set up. All that to say, I used Glitzer Popping to save 26 minutes compared to an RNG minute. The next thing I had to do was farm money, vitamins, and Master Balls. But I don't actually need to do any of that since I can clone items, so we'll skip this. We do still have one big time sink though, which is the power items. These are required for EV training, and there's really no way to skip this process or glitch through it as far as I know. This is 8 hours and 36 minutes of a battle tower grind. It is brutal. I wish I could speed it up, but it's our only real serious time loss. All in all, this prep phase took 8 hours and 57 minutes with glitches. That means we saved 21 hours of prep work. That is a significant time save already. But with the prep work done, it's time to get Pokemon. The team I use only has one static legendary on it, and we'll be getting it from Pokemon Emerald. It's Latias. This might seem like quite a time loss, but there's actually a couple of upsides to this. 3 Pokemon that I need, Shroomish, Trapinch, and Beldum, are actually not so common in the Generation 4 games. They're relegated to slower methods, like Headbutt Trees, Swarms, or the Safari Zone in Heart Gold. So I can catch and receive them here to be used as parents once Latias is done, and then transfer them all up together. But this Pokemon Emerald is already completed, and I already caught Latias from Southern Island on this save. What am I to do? Isn't this why I replayed Emerald last time? Well, luckily, there's a cool glitch that lets you respawn Latias and do much, much more. Arbitrary code execution. Earlier, I used Glitzer Popping to get Pokerus. But if you're very precise with the information of the Pokemon that you corrupt, as I said earlier, you can transform it into a different species. And I've done this before in a video to turn a Natu into the elusive Wish Chansey event. However, you can use this to make a species that doesn't exist. And these species can be unstable in various ways. But the one we are going to take advantage of is called 0x40E9. It has a glitch animation that tries to retrieve data for said animation from the names of your Pokemon boxes, which will get read as GBA assembly code. All I have to do is type in some specific box names and then watch this glitch Pokemon animate, and we can respawn Latias. This is kind of like having an action replay built into your save file, but with no external mods. If you want to learn more about the setup for this, you can watch my friend Papa Hefe's and Sleipnir's videos on them. It's really informative stuff. Anyway, we're going to do a few more things once Latias is respawned. First, we'll change our secret ID to make it shiny when we encounter it. Then, after that, I did a bit of an oopsie. I spent about 25 minutes doing the painting RNG method, something I will not explain in this video, to try and get close to a shiny 6IV Latias. After enough failures though, I decided to hard pivot to using arbitrary code execution even more. So let's explain how this arbitrary code works and how Emerald's RNG methods work in general. In Pokemon Emerald, Game Freak made a bigger oopsie than I just did, wasting 25 minutes. They completely screwed up how the random luck works in this game. Typically, when a computer needs to make up luck, it uses something to randomly generate a number. In Ruby and Sapphire, they convert the date and time from the internal battery to this number. And in Fire Red and Leaf Green, they use a very, very fast moving value in the GBA's CPU chip. In Emerald, it's nothing. They use nothing. They forgot to put it in. So the game's randomness always starts at the same value, which is 0. This heavily limits which Pokemon are available to me, both in natures and IV spreads. And while there are techniques like the painting method which do circumvent this, they can be time consuming. The problem here is that the random number generator in Pokemon Emerald is linear. It starts at 0 and goes forward by adding specific values to itself repeatedly. If the Latias I want is generated on 0, I'd have to do this sequence 122,607,834 times. Now, the game does move the random number generator passively at 60 frames per second forward, but this would still take me 23 days to reach this point for a one-time try, which I actually have done before, not kidding. However, using arbitrary code execution, we can set the RNG number to be whatever we want. So I pick one that's only 48 seconds away from my desired Latias. And then I watch the Glitchmon, and I get my Latias in 2 tries. Quite an improvement over the failure of the painting method. I don't usually use this technique because it feels too cheap even for using glitches and arbitrary code execution, but I really should have just done it from the jump. This is all about speed for this challenge, and I think I've learned my lesson and I'm not going to hold back anymore, even with the craziest, most powerful glitches. That took about 20 minutes after I ditched the painting method, so we're at about an hour of gameplay now. But we've got a bit more to do in Emerald. So I organize my boxes, and while there, I find a random Beldum that will work perfectly as a parent. So I put that next to Latias for when I transfer them up. Then I head to Petalburg Forest to find a Shroomish, which I miraculously do on the very first encounter. After that, we go to Route 111 and find a Trapinch in the desert to serve as a parent as well. With those 2 caught and the Beldum already obtained, I only need 1 more Pokemon. A male Pokemon who can learn Pursuit via level up and breed with the Larvitar line. The best bet was actually Trico, a Pokemon I do not have. So I have to use 1 more code via arbitrary code execution to respawn Professor Birch's bag and pick another starter. I pick Trico and I make sure it's male, and I get it to level 16 using some cloned rare candies. And that's all the Pokemon we will need from Emerald version. I also attached some items that could be useful for later within the Generation 4 games. A few Master Balls, a Heart Scale, and the TM for Earthquake. In case you don't know, the transfer from Generation 3 to Generation 4 actually allows Pokemon to keep their held items. This is the only time, other than the Gen 1 and 2 trades, where that can happen as well. There's one more thing I need to transfer, and it's a PP Max. So I grab one I didn't pick up from the Team Magma Fortress, although I could have respawned it with a code if necessary. Then I attach it to a final Pokemon to transfer up. All in all, my time in Emerald so far was 1 hour and 24 minutes. With all of this done, let's move on to Generation 4. First thing we do in Generation 4 is collect our Pokemon from the Pal Park. After that, I have to catch 2 more Pokemon for breeding. A female Larvitar, and a perfect ditto for every other Pokemon. First up is the Larvitar, who I RNG manipulated. Heart Gold and Soul Silver do not have any notable bugs or problems with their randomness like Pokemon Emerald does, but it's very, very exploitable. They used an open source RNG algorithm, and the thing that decides the initial random state is the date and time, which we can easily change using the Nintendo DS's settings. The date and time accuracy is a bit strict since you have to press A on the save file select with 1/30th of a second precision, but once you're in the game, it's a lot simpler to manipulate than Emerald. It doesn't move passively at 60 frames per second, no. It only does the random number math when it's needed. So we just need something that can force this math to happen that's also under our control, which is Chatot, who has a custom chatter. Chatter is Chatot's signature move, and it has a cool feature in the DS games. You can record and say anything you want, and then every time you listen to Chatot or use an HM or whatever, it'll play that sound back at a slightly different pitch every single time. I just have to listen to the pitch, identify what pitch it is, and use that information to see if I did the date and time correctly. If I did, then I blast off and play a bunch of Chatot cries to move the RNG forward until I am ready for the battle, which I trigger via the field move Sweet Scent. And behold, a perfect female Larvitar to serve as the mother and recipient of the egg move Pursuit. We then repeat this same process for a Ditto with 6 perfect IVs to serve as the parent for everybody else, since nobody needs egg moves. All of this setup for the breeding, including the transfers, took about 40 minutes. Now onto the breeds, which are all going to work identically. It's the same process I described for Larvitar, but in 2 steps. First, you generate the Pokemon's personality value, which describes its nature, gender, ability, and shiny status. So you hit your date and time, confirm that the seed is correct, and then run around until the daycare man is holding an egg. At that point, you save and reset, because while the man is holding the egg, the personality value is set. We then do this process again, but for the Pokemon's IVs. And this time, the final step is when we receive the egg from the daycare man. If we did both correctly, we will end up with a shiny Pokemon with the nature that we desired, and with 5 or 6 perfect IVs, depending on which Pokemon I was going for. And, as described, it seems like it'd be quick, but there is a problem. Eggs take a long time to hatch. Pokemon like Beldum and Larvitar take an exceedingly long time to hatch, in fact. There's nothing more I could do, though, so I pushed on, hatching 5 shiny eggs one at a time, sometimes more than 10 minutes per hatch. And if I ever messed up, which I didn't, I'm the GOAT, I would have to rehatch the egg. But with skilled timing, it only took me 2 hours and 10 minutes to get 5 6IV shiny Pokemon for the team. You might say, that's a pretty long time, and it is. But personally, I think it's pretty darn quick. If you've ever tried to do breeding in Gens 3, 4, or 5, you will know how time-consuming it is just to get even 2 perfect IVs, let alone 3. God forbid 6. This generation doesn't have the Destiny Knot, where things can be made easy and you can pass down a bunch of perfect IVs from your parents. And it has no techniques other than RNG manipulation to get guaranteed 31 IVs. So you can't get better than this. We now have our entire 6 Pokemon team ready to EV train. Our entire time so far is 4 hours and 12 minutes. Well, how are we looking at compared to my video where I don't use glitches? Well, in this, if I had the prep timer, I'm at 13 hours and 9 minutes. In the original, 37 hours and 21 minutes. A literal 24-hour gap. But let's see if we can keep widening it. In the EV training section. On the surface, it might seem like there's nothing I can do to speed up EV training. There's no glitches related to it, so what am I going to do here? Well, the fix is with money, not the training itself. In Japanese Diamond and Pearl 1.0, there's a glitch that can speed everything up for us, and it's going to impact everything else that I have to do for this challenge. The Transform Clone Glitch. The way this works is pretty simple. If a Pokemon is holding an item and then transforms, if that item is then taken via the move Thief, the item stays on the transformed Pokemon, but also gets given to the Pokemon who used Thief. That's actually it. So I can clone all the items I want via the Japanese copy of Pokemon Pearl that I have and save time farming money. It might seem slow, but it's actually faster and more convenient than anything Heart Gold had to offer. The way rematches work in those games is specific to a single day of the week, and while I could farm money against the rich people in this copy of Pearl, it's just the same thing as repeating battles over and over again. But I mentioned this not just for cloning vitamins, no, but because you can clone any item that can be held. And that means rare candy cloning, baby! And this is definitely faster and less annoying than cloning 6 mons in the Pal Park and sending them up to Gen 4 over and over and over again. So I traded my Pokemon over to Pearl version and gave them all the vitamins they needed. Then I traded them back and began my training. Training is pretty simple in these games. At level 100, which is what the Smogon formats are played at, 4 EVs earned equates to 1 point in a specific stat. With Pokerus, which I got earlier via Glitzer popping, and the power items, which I farmed via the Frontier in 2022, we gain 10 EVs if we KO a Pokemon, who would typically give us 1. This means if we want to max out a stat, we KO 15 of a particular species, and then we take the power item off to get 1 final KO, leaving us at a cap of 252 EVs. In Generation 4, you have to be careful about this, because you're actually allowed to go to 255 EVs, even though that's not divisible by 4. So you can be wasteful. It's important to keep that in mind. Last but not least, a lot of these Pokemon are weak and low level, so I have to swap train them. My general technique was to lead with the Pokemon that I want to train, swap to my Feraligatr, and have him KO whatever was there while I kept count using the PP of Feraligatr's move Crunch. The only one who didn't need to do this was Latias, who was level 50. This is the exact same thing I did in my previous video, minus the cloning and plus having to swap train more Pokemon, since in that game I had a couple of powerful legendaries who could get all of the KOs themselves. The biggest time saver though, the entire time I'm EV training here, I, on a second DS, am clone glitching. Is that a bit cheap? Yeah, but that's kind of the point. A lot of people tell me that it's fine for older fans or more loyal fans who's been playing since they were a kid to have an advantage like this. But to me, it's blatantly pay to win, and I don't like it. So I'm going to show how much of an advantage this can truly give a player by spending a lot of time on 2 DSs at once. A lot of people also like to say that it's only natural that competing in a sport would cost a lot of money. If you were to compete in tennis, for example, you would need to pay money to have a good racket. But that's the nature of tennis. If you want to compete, you literally need to own a tennis racket and good shoes. Pokemon is a video game where the rules of the game are arbitrarily set by a company. You need to own multiple games for this generation of competitive play because Game Freak decided that's what you would require. The same for Scarlet and Violet. So if I could take advantage of this, I will, and I don't think it's fair. Anyway, each Pokemon, aside from Latias, took about 20 minutes to train. Add up the trading between Pearl and Heart Gold, which does take a while, and this took me 4 hours on the dot. We are now at 17 hours on our glitch run. So how's the original challenge doing? 45 hours and 58 minutes? Yikes. We are 28 hours ahead at this point, and it's only going to grow from here though, as we move on to completing the Pokemon. This section is going to be a bit of everything. We have to level up our Pokemon, get the proper moves, get them their items, and max the PP on their moves. And this can be more tedious than it seems. Some of these moves are rare, tutor-only moves that in Heart Gold take a ton of battle points. And level grinding in the Generation 4 games is not exactly quick. The first thing I decided to tackle was levels. At this point, I took inventory of how many rare candies I had in Pearl, and I calculated exactly how many more I would need and what Pokemon would be reasonable to get to what level. I had 64 rare candies that I cloned during the Eevee training. Beldum needed to get to level 48 to learn Agility and Meteor Mash as a Metang, and then Larvitar needed to get to level 55 to evolve and learn Crunch. Ghastly needed to get to 25 for Sucker Punch and Evolution, Shroomish needed to be at 45 for Spore before it evolves, and Trapinch needed to get to level 45 to evolve. The plan? Use 25 candies, each on Larvitar and Beldum, and then 15 on Shroomish and Trapinch, and 0 to Ghastly and Latias. So, I traded my entire team over to my Platinum copy, along with a Lucky Egg, where they would all be of different original trainers, so they would gain way more EXP. The Lucky Egg would further increase this gain, and was something that I got in my original playthrough back when I was getting Ray Rizzo's team. Then I repeatedly used the Versus Seeker against this Gyarados trainer. They give a ton of EXP and are easy to KO with my Latias by using the TM for Shockwave. And while doing that, I am still cloning candies. Eventually, I finished after about an hour, but am I done with cloning? Of course not. While the rare candies are done, the PP max I got from Pokemon Emerald needs to be cloned. In my original playthrough, I had to spend hours farming the Pokathlon just to get this done and get PP ups. I needed like 70. Here, it's only going to be 23 clones. But that's not all. On my other DS, I go and get some shards in Pokemon Emerald and clone them really fast using the fast clone Pokemon. I specifically needed the blue and red shards. This is for move tutor moves in Platinum. In Heart Gold, the move tutor costs battle points, which take forever to farm. But in Platinum, it's these shards you get from rock smashing or something, I don't actually know. But you can also get them in Emerald. So I clone them in Emerald and send them up. But Platinum only has a once a day transfer, right? Well, there's actually a glitch around that too. After you transfer Pokemon, change the date on your DS. Then try to send up the Pokemon from a different game. The game will get mad and lock you out from transferring, but only for that game pack for 24 hours. Then, for some reason, you can use the original game pack as normal. So I sent up 12 Pokemon with all the shards I needed this way, all while still cloning. We're almost done, and it's time for the moves now. I had to teach Draco Meteor to Latias and Trapinch. This is a move that only works if your Pokemon has high enough friendship, and that can take a long time to grind. I actually tried to do this slightly earlier in the playthrough by spamming haircuts using the date skip feature, but it took way too long and wasted kind of a lot of time. But then I remembered that Diamond and Pearl also have a glitch for friendship. In these games, you can, While in a battle, spam the friendship lowering healing items on a Pokemon. And if you get the friendship value to be a negative, the game interprets it as the highest possible value. So I do this for both Latias and Trapinch. It did take a little bit of extra doing because you can't get the highest value, only a really close one. So I had to use 9 more rare candies on Latias and clone them again to get her to love me. Trapinch wasn't an issue though, since I hadn't evolved him yet and could use the amount of rare candies I had already planned for. We now just need to level up all the Pokemon and get the moves on them. And to answer a quick question I'm sure you may have, why, for a metagame played at level 100, is it fine to have a level 26 Gengar here? Well, viewer, it's because the Gen 4 games have really good online play features. In Gen 4 only, you have 3 options for levels: set 50, set 100, and open level. No matter the level, set 50 or 100, they will force your Pokemon to go to that level, even if it's level 1. So I don't need to get my Pokemon any higher level than the minimum required. Also, this gen had no timer for the battle. Pretty cool, right? Did you know that you could still do Diamond and Pearl Wi-Fi battles using the Fan GTS network? Just a thought. Anyway, once I spam the candies onto the Pokemon, I have to use a singular heart scale on Breloom to teach it Mach Punch, a move Shroomish cannot learn. Then I use TMs to give every remaining Pokemon their movesets, or all that I could, and then I use PP Max on every move as well. The final thing I had to do was trade Breloom and Flygon to Platinum to do the move tutors there. And when I trade them, I attached PP Maxes to them, so I didn't have to put them back in Pearl version. I taught them the move tutors and then used the PP Maxes, and with that, every Pokemon is fully battle ready. We just need their items, which I have already in this copy of Soul Silver I used for Ray Rizzo's team. The entire final sequence, from leveling to friendship to getting the moves, took a lot longer than it may have seemed from this concise description. 6 hours and 23 minutes. I lost about an hour of time because of the friendship thing before I remembered the glitch. And in general, trading is actually very slow in these games. So using multiple video games actually slowed me down a little bit, more than I would expect it. In total, this challenge took me 23 hours and 23 minutes, just barely under 24 hours. I actually can't believe I did it, considering the original run was 60 hours and 36 minutes. Unbelievable. I shaved off 37 hours from this challenge by using glitches and multiple games I did not have access to before. To be honest, it still feels too long. I probably could have saved from time if I used more arbitrary code execution, I think. Maybe RNG manipulating Beldum, Shroomish, and Trapinch in Emerald using the glitch to change the RNG state was the better play. I think this was only because hatches took a really long time. But let me know what you think. Did you enjoy me doing all of these glitches and revisiting my older playthrough like that? I could do this in Generation 3 if you guys are interested. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I did this all in one stream on my YouTube channel right here. So just click that subscribe button and make sure to follow me if you want to see me do more cool challenges live or in a video format. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next video. The biggest takeaway for me for this is that, yes, this did save time, a lot of time in fact, and I was not nearly as optimal as I was in my original playthrough. I planned that specific challenge out extremely well, and this, while I did do some planning, it was not nearly as much. Glitches enhance the speed, but everything in these older games still takes a long time, and I think that you can tell that this was by design. Game Freak wasn't considering competitive back then. It just wasn't something that they were doing. The move tutor stuff, that was all for battles with friends or the battle frontier or a cool reward to get a rare move if your Latias liked you enough. Stuff like that. And I think this goes to show that they really did consider these games single-player RPGs back in the day. It's supposed to be like a multi-day journey to get a Pokemon that has 3 perfect IVs. That's an achievement, right? Even when I'm doing RNG manipulation, I RNG the Pokemon pretty quickly, an hour, something like that. But then after that, it's like multiple different hour-long detours to go get the item that I need or to go get a specific move for the Pokemon, stuff like that. And I think that's something that I miss in the current games. Only from a single player perspective though. I'm glad that things have improved and that you don't need to use glitches anymore. And that's why I really wish they just put in a Pokemon editor so that they could make getting Pokemon in game take a really long time again for battles with friends if I wanted to, or to have an actual challenge for building a team for the battle tower, stuff like that. Because I think there is value in these things that take a long time. If you've ever played a game like Animal Crossing, the fun in that game is taking a long time to get the correct item or something like that, right? And Pokemon used to be that way. And in the context of a single player game, it's actually totally fine. I just don't like it for when I have to build a team for VGC, you know? In the end, I think this shows that there is a big divide between people who want to have fun as a single player adventure and Game Freak's need and desire to balance these as competitive multiplayer games. I don't really know what else to do about it other than the fact that I think these games should just be separated. There should be the competitive games and there should be the story games. I don't love that solution either. Ideally, competitive would just be a simulator, but I think that's a pipe dream. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.